What became so popular at your school that the teachers had to ban it? Story 1. Kids weren't even using them to shoot other kids or act inappropriately in any other way. Rubber band bundles would be purchased by kids. Make a large rubber band chain by tying the rubber bands together. It evolved into a competition to see who could stretch a chain of rubber bands the longest. For nearly 20 miles, no shop had a pack of rubber bands. There weren't many retailers in those 20 miles since I was living in a tiny town at the time. Simply said, Amazon wasn't around yet, much alone public internet access. One child received so many rubber bands that, while being dumb, they could span the length of the school building. As long as kids weren't firing them or using them to fire things, I didn't think it was a horrible pastime. It all came down to how long of a chain they could build. The school punished our fruitless ingenuity by banning rubber bands in the building. On the spot, all rubber band chains were seized. It seems like the ideal setup for a senior prank. All the doors and hallways were blocked by rubber band chains, which seemed to be interwoven webs, combined their efforts and encircled the institution. Story 2. When mobile phones eventually became affordable enough for the majority of people to get one, I was a senior in high school. They didn't make the announcement that phones were prohibited anywhere on school premises until approximately a week into senior year. Similar situation in my class, except now students really have theirs out and are using them at their desks, and the professors are obliging. Yes, the manual still states that phones are not permitted, but that is simply no longer the case. When the instructor is talking, most children are typically courteous enough to refrain from using them. But after the lecture is over, everyone has left, hallways in general. They're permitted at all times, is what our class president's platform during his first year in office centered on saying them aloud over lunch. We had school Wi-Fi by the time I was in my junior year, and our campus is now tech-friendly. Additionally, you are free to bring any kind of device, laptop, tablet, whatever, inside. Story 3. The young person who opened a tuck shop in his locker went to a wholesaler and purchased some goods, then used the proceeds to purchase more. Repeat these steps until the kid guard is being staffed to prevent stealing and the rental of other people's lockers for stock overflow. Children began to queue up to purchase energy drinks and sweets in our classroom, and sometimes the line was so long that it took him more than 15 minutes to serve everyone. Then bang! Done! Nothing may be sold on school grounds. Mostly directed towards this child, after stabbing someone, the guy was ejected. I have no clue where he is now, but I believe that having his business shut down and replaced with an expensive, well-run tuck shop killed his desire to be an entrepreneur. The most is this. Welcome to this site's real-life narrative. No brilliant ideas. A large firm enters, appropriates the concept, and benefits from it. That is regrettable. Story 4. In a game we used to play when I was younger, you drew a circle on your palm, and other players tried to draw a line within it. You were eliminated if someone managed to draw a line across your circle. Being the last person standing was the aim of the game. It started off little, but as time went on, practically every student in my grade became involved, and things got out of hand. Chaos, plain and simple. Children were fighting, avoiding other pupils, interrupting classes, etc. After a while, teachers started discussing how far our game had progressed with us and started outlawing it entirely. When it was enjoyable, it was. Boys makes me think of a pretty fun battle royale our school participated in while on a field trip. There were around 200 students from grades 7 through 12 since we often had school excursions as a whole. Each person received a brief letter with the name of a different student. You had to deliver something to that guy. Anything arbitrary. The only thing that mattered was that the student freely swapped the item with you. If you succeed, the pupil will have to provide you with their name. At the conclusion of the week, the pupils with the most name letters received a gift. Greatest game ever. Such phony warmth and anxiety. For instance, someone distributed some candy. Everybody ate one. He suddenly thought, frick. Yeah, giving candy to everyone was done just to encourage that one individual who was nearby to accept one. If someone said, hey, would you like a bonbon? No, forget it. Everyone chimed in. considering that they believed it was a shoddy effort at them. I also recall receiving a letter through the door with the words, "Come to this, in that room at this time," written on it and addressed to me. And when I got there, it was my closest buddies, the Dark Brotherhood, who had developed a scheme where we would correspond through letters in order to better plot our objectives. I find it fascinating how kids can form hidden societies with a simple game. Story 5. Gel pens. The females in my elementary school had this strange habit of sucking on the gel pen tips, which caused the color of their tongues to change. In order to avoid being discovered, they would swap pens in the restrooms at school, elude the instructors, and hide in the playground. It was the closest I could come up with. Add a drug ring to it. But picture it with girls who are 7 years old. One of my classmates was quite popular because she was the student that sucked on the most pens and was consistently seen using a different gel pen in every class. And since she would make herself ill and vomit, the instructors would constantly have to carry her to the nurse. They were finally outlawed. When I had tried it, I instantly spat it out since the flavor was foul and reminded me of ink. Duh! I never understood it back then, and I still don't. The student who consumed the most pens and was consistently seen using a different gel pen in every lesson. Not with gel pens, though. Story 6. And the instructor. Until recently, we had to forbid applauding. Random applauding rounds from the youngsters would simply keep going. It made me uneasy. It was interfering with class meetings. They sometimes cheered in the dining room or hallways. I still don't understand how or why this pattern began. The practice of pilgrimage has to be outlawed as well. Evidently, they picked up the term in religious studies classes. After that, they would move in big groups while shouting pilgrimage and essentially trample anybody or everything that was in their way as they moved from one end of the school to the other. Story 7. Arm bags, shoes, smartboard remotes, baseball bats, watches, even people's real heads and pens. Literally anything, such as playing with balls. The fact that the school provided free contraceptives was the finest part. The resistance was being fueled by them. After a week, condom use in public was prohibited. Anyone found in possession of a condom that wasn't concealed in a jacket or bag was instantly placed in custody. Someone was brought in to distribute condoms at my university. In a handful of the toilets over the next several days, knotted condoms filled with water repeatedly surfaced. Story 8. My first grade class was split into 2 groups, rats and penguins. When it came to games, team duties, or practically anything else, we would always turn to our group. The school eventually split into these 2 groups as a result of a genuine rivalry that somehow developed, with first and second years engaging in real fights and other activities. The penguin team and the rat team were quickly banned, and the principal went to each classroom to announce this. Soon after, he called off recess for the day. After that, some people did form some smaller animal name societies, but they all disintegrated rather fast. In your primary school, gangs were essentially born. Theft of education. Story 9. Chameleon Hughes. They allegedly banned it at the whole school because of their gang affiliation. Camels charging in the southeast region of Columbus, Ohio. I attended high school. Half wannabe hoodlums, quarter posh youngsters, and half wannabe rednecks. The mixture was stupid. For the record, there were so many complaints that the issue was the subject of a school assembly where students defended their positions. And while I can't recall what they said, it included gangs. I believe it was gang mentality or another factor. Story 10. From 2009 to 2011, I attended middle school. It was tremendous to play Balloons Tower Defense. It was played by everyone in any space with a computer. However, individuals continued finding ways around them, so the school decided to outright ban Adobe Flash. Someone at my high school was able to set up Quake 3 Arena on the main server so that any computer linked to the network could access it. Children in my web development class were competing with one another during study hall in the library on the opposite side of the building. I'm not sure whether the administration was ever made aware of this, but the year after I graduated, all of the Windows machines were replaced with Amacs. We performed the same action with Unreal Tournament, and Soldier of Fortune was awarded several days of LAN service. This would have occurred between 1999 and 2001, or something like Story 11. Teachers were wary of assisting everyone since the children were too dim to figure out how to insert the straws. That's both funny and depressing. Capri Suns used to be simple to puncture, but between 2005 and 2009, it seems like all of a sudden, they become ridiculously difficult. Story 12. Grade 10, someone chose to use a ruler to strike a man across the head in high school, for whatever reason. Everyone then left and went and got a ruler. All of a sudden, everyone was a swashbuckling knight. Since rulers are inexpensive, students just went out and bought them by the handfuls despite staff seizing them repeatedly. In the end, a school banned rulers. Rulers had to be given out at the start of class and then returned to the students who required them and were studying geometry that year. It becomes hot enough to gravely burn someone and leave a scar if you quickly brush the metal edge of a ruler across the sole of your shoe. When I was in 8th school, a kid did it to me, and it stung very bad and took a decade to go away. I was furious. Story 13, 2003 hair flips. Skater hair that was particularly long was in. The hair of the children was being flipped out of their eyes and faces.
Mr. Instructor from the 8th grade went on
based on the justification that hair flaps cause air pollution from hair dust. Children began receiving detentions. That's a very ridiculous pretense, but I can see how the instructors would have been irritated by the youngsters flicking their hair like they had to read. In high school, my professors cruelly teased the hair flippers until they stopped. The hair flippers learned that it enraged the instructor, so they started deliberately flipping their hair to irritate her. She made a monster out of herself. My hair is being tossed about. Story 14. Our year reportedly apologized too much, so we really got a half-hour lesson at assembly. I've been speaking English for 3 hours, and nobody has yet to joke about Canada. Story 15. People bringing in their Game Boy colors and playing at recess according to children were irate. They weren't receiving turns, and they were concerned about game theft freaking the day after my copy of Pokemon Silver was taken from my bag. Jeremy discovered a duplicate. But you can't be too furious with the youngster. About a year later, his brother was arrested for rubbing their mother. Well, the situation immediately became worse. Story 16. Someone developed a pattern by often bringing alcohol into the school. I believe the only extreme item in someone's lunchbox was the discovery of a whole ant colony inside. Story 17. I recall when they were outlawed at my school in the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was said that someone had used a subpar counterfeit slap bracelet to sever someone's finger down to the bone somewhere in the school. Parents started to push back at this point around the nation. I would expect suburban parents to spread rumors like these. Story 18. Tarot card readers. Those paper origami ones, right? Those. Oh, and so do you, Gee? Oh, cards and Pokemon cards? Really? Wow. My school had no one who could create them. Nobody had any trouble wrapping mine. And given how much paper we wasted, I believe the school prohibited them. Truth be told, Narrative 19 is about those little skateboards called tech decks. We used to exchange them and bemoan the loss. My book was taken by a butthole instructor who promised to return it at the end of the day, but I never received it. Never will I forgive her. With a child's tech deck, you don't panic out. Oh my God. I experienced the same thing. However, a student went to the teacher's desk one day and snatched back everyone's belongings as she left the classroom. That has just taken me back. Story 19. In the 3rd grade, a few students developed an obsession with the terms cheese, FedEx, and camel. They often used them. And the whole class was instructed to refrain from using them. Very like anything from my elementary school. There was a week when everyone adopted a new tagline from an advertisement. There were disputes about who should use which term. Story 21. I was in the 3rd grade when I was 60. There was a prohibition on sunflower seeds. I was informed that the instructors believed these were drugs. They were both filthy and unconventional, like hippie health food, which is why I believe it was. Apparently, if you consume enough poppy seeds, a drug test will identify your presence. Story 22. They claimed that wearing a hood up may prevent intimidation. Many of the men replied by refusing to remove their hoodies the next day by donning them instead. Story 23. There was a craze in primary school in the late 1990s when we would collect Absolute vodka and Milk Mustache advertisements and save them in binders like Pokemon cards. It was brutal. Children would bring magazines to school by the dozen and just tear off the pages containing the advertisements. They were prohibited by the school due of the extreme distraction. Why these particular ads? I'll make a judgment based just on how they seemed. Absolute vodka advertisements always featured the bottle and were very artistically designed with the phrase Absolute Blanc at the bottom. Milk Mustache advertisements often included some form of celebrity. Perhaps every star who had a milk mustache was doing it to get noticed. Additionally, Absolute was acquiring every new phrase or bottle. Story 24. Yes, we have it. It involves gambling. A group of losers once lost the Pogs. They wagered, then grumbled about it. It always works out like that. Everyone's fun is ended when the losers' mothers show up at school and start threatening lawsuits over cardboard circles. Story 25. Cool math my school recently disabled XCOM. To be honest, only approximately 90s of the website is truly about math. I was on day 67 in my Papa Scoop area, so that's why I'm really unhappy. Story 26. Pokemon's popularity led to its prohibition. Magic was outlawed because it was satanic. Pokemon cards were outlawed at my school because they turned into a kind of black market trade and smaller students were losing their cards to larger kids. It grew into a significant controversy as a result of several instances. When the game first started, I recall how proud you were to show off an extremely rare card to all your friends. If you had a rare card during the conclusion of the Pokemon card mania, you would save that things and place it in the cemetery. If someone learned that you had a shiny Charizard or a chance, they would start stalking you and it would definitely be stolen within a week. Story 27. There was a student in my high school who produced duct tape wallets for an estimated $500 a month. When the administration learned, the wallets were not banned, just outlawed doing business on school property. Someone circulated the campus selling his origami for 50 cents each. Every day he would get orders and fulfill them at home. Sounds like the schools need to encourage his entrepreneurial endeavors. If the kids are more motivated, providing everything they are selling is legitimate. Story 28. They were two little hard balls at each end of a lengthy thread. The bullies would instead smack you over the head with them even when you made them click together. I'm old! You were perfectly capable of smacking yourself in the head, so you didn't need a bully. I came here to bring this up. I am also elderly. We are fortunate to have lived. Story 29. We are only permitted to have your two for the bus in if you were caught by a teacher who even cared. The money might be taken and kept by the instructor. The fact that it is now illegal has altered this. A student once lost your 75 to an instructor. Fortunately, she was compelled to return it. What the frick is the justification for that? How much trouble might you cause with €2? I have no idea how they managed to get to euros in particular, but they undoubtedly intended to stop students from having access to enough cash to purchase narcotics. Story 30. With these sour candies, it became a significant problem. The kids with the biggest allowances organized a black market where they would purchase them in quantity from corner shops for a nickel each, give them to older students for a quarter apiece, and then sell them to the end consumer for 50 cents each candy. Even the entryway had a barrier. You had to take 3 candies at once without spitting them out or throwing up if you wanted to succeed in the company. The actual entry point into the drug trade is Warhead. Story 31. In the game Get Down, Mr. President, players placed their fingers to their ears to simulate the Secret Service, and the last one to do so was tackled. It would eventually result in a dog pile in the hallway and might begin at any time. I won't mince words. I'm a 30-something. I'm beginning that thing is at work tomorrow now that I know that's the issue. Story 32. There were numerous oak trees in the primary schoolyard where I went to school, and students would gather their acorns and preserve them in their desks. The issue was that the majority of the acorns had worms, which eventually escaped and entered the classrooms. Story 33. We had something called Big Hag, which is Swedish for homosexual people. Everyone pushed themselves upon the person who was laying on the ground, creating a mass of bodies. Okay, I'm hoping a Swedish speaker will chime in and correct my pronunciation of Big Hag. I was counting on you people to correct me, so I didn't even bother to check up the pronunciation. In light of the fact that I like the Swedes, I present to you my interpretation of happy birthday in Swedish.